The 14th of February 1943. Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. 7:42 a.m. The North African desert sun rises as red as blood. The sand is still cold. The dry air cuts like a razor. Long shadows stretch across the rocky valley where the 10th Panzer Division waits. At the advanced command post, Oberst Wilhelm von Reichmann observes through Zeiss binoculars. 41 years old, veteran of Poland, France, and Russia. Knight's cross around his neck. Shrapnel scars on his face. He smiles. Ahead of them, an American column approaches. Inexperienced. First real battle against the Afrika Korps. Trucks, jeeps, M3 half-tracks scattered without proper formation. Greenhorns? Murmura. Novatos. Beside him, Major Hans Kruger laughs. The Americans think war is an assembly line, Mr. Oberst. Quantity over quality. Reichmann lowers the binoculars. Let them come. Our MG 42 seconds will teach them what real rate of fire is. The American column stops at 800 meters, too far for German machine guns. Reichmann shook his head. Why did they stop? An American soldier descends from the half-track, moves to the rear, removes the tarp. It reveals something. A machine gun, but not just any machine gun. It's bigger than an MG 42, longer barrel, mounted on a heavy tripod. The soldier adjusts the elevation. It carries a belt of ammunition. Large cartridges gleam in the sun. Kruger laughs again. Are they going to try to hit us from 800 meters away? With a machine gun? Verrückt. Crazy. American gunner Sergeant Joe Thompson, a 26-year veteran of Detroit, adjusts his sights. He takes a deep breath. He presses the butterfly double trigger. Thump, 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 thump. The sound isn't like the MG 42. It's not the high-pitched buzzing of an angry bee. It's a hammer blow, deep, methodical. 4-12. 7x99 mm. NATO projectiles cut through 800 meters in less than a second. The first bullet hits the stone wall where Reichmann is taking shelter. It doesn't bounce back. Crossover. The rock explodes into lethal fragments. A second projectile hits a German observer in the chest. It doesn't pierce. Disassemble. The upper torso simply disappears into a red mist. The third and fourth projectiles hit the MG 42 position. The 8mm steel shield, designed to withstand rifle fire, is perforated like paper. Gunner killed instantly. Reichmann throws himself to the ground. What is that? What the hell is this? M2 continues firing. 450 shots per minute. Each projectile weighs 45 grams. Speed. 890 meters per second. Kinetic energy. 18,000 joules. For comparison, the German Kar-98K rifle delivers 3,600 joules, 5 times more power. At 800 meters, the M2 can still penetrate 16 millimeters of steel, sufficient to penetrate the side armor of a German half-track, more than enough to destroy makeshift cover. Kruger tries to run to a better position. 3 steps. A. 50 caliber bullet struck his right leg near his thigh. It doesn't break the bone. You rip off the entire leg. He falls. He looks at where his leg should be. He screams. He dies of shock in 40 seconds. Reichmann crawls to the radio. All units, retreat, retreat immediately. The withdrawal is chaotic. Germans abandon fortified positions that took days to prepare. They flee from a single machine gun. When the fight ends, 30 minutes later, 12 Germans killed, 23 injured, 3 machine gun positions destroyed, 2 vehicles rendered unusable. American casualties, 0. Ammunition used, 600. 50 caliber cartridges. Cost, approximately $300 in ammunition. Reichmann sobrevive. In the post-action report, he writes, "The enemy possesses a new heavy machine gun with unprecedented range and destructive power. Our cover and suppression tactics are useless. Standard fortifications are inadequate. I urgently request the development of countermeasures." The command in Berlin initially dismissed the report. American propaganda, they say. Exaggeration from a defeated commander. What they didn't know was that on that day, in the scorching Tunisian desert, they were witnessing only the beginning of a reign of mechanical terror that would last not only that war, but would extend for an entire century of conflict. 2. The birth of the monster. John Moses Browning was not a soldier. He was an artist. Born in 1,855 inches, Ogden, Utah. Son of a gunsmith. He grew up surrounded by tools, forges, and the Mormon philosophy of meticulous work. At the age of 10, he built his first rifle from scratch. At 24, he patented a repeating rifle that Winchester would later buy. By the time he was 40, he had already revolutionized small arms 3 times. But in 1917, at the age of 62, Browning faced a new challenge. The Great War demonstrated that machine guns dominated battlefields, but it also showed a critical limitation. Caliber. Machine guns fired rifle ammunition, effective against infantry, useless against aircraft, emerging armored vehicles, and fortifications. The United States Army wanted something bigger, much bigger. General John Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, was specific. I need a machine gun that can shoot down planes from 1,000 meters away, that can pierce tank armor, that can destroy machine gun nests behind walls. Browning accepted the challenge. It started with physics. Energy equals mass times velocity squared. To multiply energy, there are 2 options: increase speed or increase mass. Speed had its limits. Metallurgy in 1918 could not withstand pressures much beyond those already in place. There was still dough left. Browning designed a monstrous cartridge, 12.7 times 99 millimeters, total length 138 millimeters, projectile weight 45 to 52 grams, compared to the standard 30 to 06 Springfield, 3 times heavier, 5 times more energy. But creating cartridges was easy. Creating a reliable machine gun to fire it was an engineering nightmare. First prototype, 1918. Catastrophic failure. Excessive recoil destroyed the mechanism after 100 shots. Second prototype, 1919. Better, but still problematic. Overheating. The barrel deformed after 200 continuous shots. Browning didn't give up. Redesigned the recoil system. Double shock absorber spring. Bolt weight, 2.5 kilograms. Reduced rate of fire to 450 to 600 revolutions per minute, allowing for cooling between shots. Heavy barrel, 10.9 kilograms for the barrel alone. Thick wall. Deep rifling. Reinforced chamber. Third prototype, 1921. Partial success. It worked, but it weighed 38 kilograms without the tripod. With tripod and ammunition, 58 kilograms. The War Department hesitated. Very heavy, very expensive, very complex. Colonel Charles Hines, of the Ordnance Department, was brutal. Browning created an elephant to kill flies, impractical for field use. Testes M. Aberdeen Proving Ground, 1923. The M2 competed against other heavy machine guns. British Vickers. 50 caliber, lighter but less reliable. Hotchkiss. French 13.2 millimeters, simpler but less powerful. M2 won in terms of range and power, but it lost out in terms of practicality. Official report: the weapon demonstrates superior ballistic capabilities. However, its excessive weight and mechanical complexity make its adoption questionable. Limited production is recommended for extended testing. Limited production. Military code for educated failure. Between 1,925 and 1,935, only a few hundred were produced, used primarily in coastal fortifications, some experimental aircraft. The Navy has shown some interest in anti-aircraft defense. The Army practically ignored it. Browning died in 1926, before seeing his creation mature. His son Val continued the refinements. Quick change barrel system. Adjustable headspace mechanism, double butterfly-type trigger for precise control, but it was still just curiosity. A weapon in search of purpose. In 1938, total production, less than 1,000 units. Germany was producing thousands of MG-34 seconds. Japan was developing the Type 92. America had an elephant that nobody wanted to ride. Captain James Morrison, an instructor at Fort Benning, wrote in 1939, "The M2 is a solution looking for a problem. Too powerful for infantry, too heavy for mobility, too expensive for mass production. No one imagined that this apparent failure of an oversized weapon carried the seeds not only of victory, but of the most extraordinary longevity in the history of automatic weapons. 3. The baptism of fire. Initial defeat. Pearl Harbor changed everything. The 7th of December, 1941. But not in the way people think. Yes, the Japanese attacked. Yes, the fleet was damaged. But what few people know is that the only American defenses that worked were M2S. 12 M2S in improvised anti-aircraft mounts shot down between 10 and 20 Japanese aircraft, depending on the source. The only significant defensive success. Problem. There were only 12 in all of Pearl Harbor. If there had been 100, the attack could have been repelled. Immediately, requests flooded the War Department. Everyone wanted M2. Navy. 1,000 units urgently. Air Force. 5,000 for bombers. Army. 10,000 for anti-aircraft defense. Problem. Production capacity in 1941 was 300 units per month. Total. The first attempt at mass production was a disaster. Converted car factories did not understand the necessary tolerances. January 1942. Batch of 500 M2 trucks produced by Chrysler. 80% failed the test. Incorrect headspace. When they fired, the projectiles would jam or, worse, the barrel would explode. Inspectors report, unacceptable quality. Weapons pose a greater danger to operators than to the enemy. Public humiliation. Newspapers questioned American industrial competence. We can't even copy a 20-year-old design, wrote the Detroit Free Press. First real mass combat. Guadalcanal, August 1942. Marines landed with M2 rifles on makeshift mounts. First night, massive Japanese attack. 3 M2S positioned on the front line. They started shooting. One jammed after 50 shots. Dirt in the mechanism. The second one overheated. The pipe deformed. The third one worked for 10 minutes. Then the spring broke. Japanese people crossed the lines. Hand-to-hand combat. 43 Marines killed. Sergeant Bob Mitchell, a survivor, testified. The damned 50 was too heavy to move quickly, too complicated to fix in the dark, and when we needed it most, it failed. Colonel Merritt Edson's report. The M2 proved unreliable in tropical combat conditions. I recommend replacing it with lighter and simpler machine guns. Germans captured some M2S in North Africa. German evaluation report. 1942. The American weapon displays an excessively complex design typical of an industrial mindset, lacking real military experience. Prohibitive weight. Complicated maintenance. The MG-42 is superior in all practical aspects. Even British allies had doubts. Marshal Montgomery commented, Americans always prefer a sledgehammer when a hammer would do. It seemed that M2 would be relegated to a footnote, a weapon that promised much, delivered little. But in the factories of Detroit and the proving grounds of Aberdeen, engineers and workers toiled day and night because they knew something critics failed to grasp. They weren't just fixing a weapon, they were creating a production system that would transform industrial warfare. 4. The invisible turnaround. Salvation came from an unexpected place. Not a general, not a famous engineer. From an assembly line worker. Eddie Kowalski, a Polish-American, worked at the GM factory in Saginaw, Michigan. Before the war, he installed hydraulic steering systems. During the war, he rode M2S. He realized something obvious that engineers were ignoring. The tolerances were too rigid. The M2 was designed as a precision weapon. Each part is machined to a tolerance of hundredths of a millimeter, perfect for handcrafted production, impossible for mass production. Kowalski suggested to the supervisor, what if we loosen tolerances on non-critical parts? A bolt needs precision. A handguard doesn't. The supervisor ignored it. Kowalski went straight to the chief engineer. He ignored it too. Kowalski did something unthinkable. He wrote a letter to the War Department. By some miracle, the letter reached Colonel René Studler, head of Small Arms Development. Studler was different. A practical engineer, not a theoretical one. He visited Saginaw in person. Kowalski demonstrated 2 M2, one with original tolerances, 3 days to produce, 60% rejection rate. One with modified tolerances, 1 day to produce, 5% rejection. Both fired 1,000 shots. Same precision, same reliability. Studler approved immediately. But the biggest change came from the production system. Instead of one factory producing the entire M2, several factories would produce parts of it. Frigidaire, latches, AC spark plug, Kanos, Kelsey Hayes, Tripes, Saginaw. Final montage. Production exploded. January 1943. 3,000 units. Month. June 1943. 12,000 units. Month. December 1943. 30,000 units. Month. But quantity wasn't the only improvement. Specialized variants developed. M2, HB, heavy barrel for sustained fire. M2 aircraft, lightweight version for airplanes. An M2. Increased cadence to 800 to 850 revolutions per minute. M45, quad mount. 4M, 2S in a single mount. Each variant is optimized for a specific use. The decisive moment came in Italy. Monte Cassino, February 1944. Germans entrenched in a fortified monastery. Stone walls 1 meter thick. The artillery was unable to dislodge them. Infantry massacred while trying to advance. Sergeant William Johnson had an idea. He positioned 6 M2S in a row, all aiming at the same point on the wall. Distance: 1,100 meters. Impossible for a regular machine gun. Routine for M2. He fired for 5 continuous minutes. 1,800 projectiles at the same spot. Each impact removes fragments of stone. It created a hole 1/2 meter wide. Then another, and another. The wall began to crumble. Terrified, the Germans abandoned their positions. German report captured. The enemy is using heavy machine guns as precision artillery. Their range and destructive power exceed our defensive capabilities. Troop morale has been severely affected. That was the beginning of the legend. And at that moment, in the Italian mountains where monks once prayed in peace, the M2 transformed from a problematic relic into a warhammer that would redefine modern combat. 5. The escalation of terror. From 1944 onwards, German accounts of the M2 changed dramatically. It was no longer an oversized weapon. It was der Knochensäger, the bone saw. Gefreiter Heinrich Müller, 12th SS Division, post-war testimony. You'd hear that sound. T-H-U-M-P, 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 and you knew someone was going to die. It didn't matter if you were behind a wall, a tree, or even in a trench. Those bullets would find you. The numbers were terrifying. Effective range: 1,830 meters. Maximum range: 7,400 meters. Penetration at 500 meters, 22 millimeters of steel. Penetration at 1,000 meters, 13 millimeters of steel. For context, the Panzer III's side armor was 15 millimeters thick. The M2 could destroy a German medium tank by firing from the side. Normandy, June 1944, changed everything. Americans landed with 15,000 square meters, in jeeps, M half tracks, in tanks, in fortifications, on ships, even in backpacks, disassembled, carried by a squad. Hauptmann Karl Weiss, 21st Panzer Regiment. We attacked the American position with what we thought was a 3-to-1 advantage. They had 10 M2S on half tracks. We lost 2 Panzer IVs and 3 SDKFZ 251 seconds in 4 minutes. We didn't even get 500 meters. The sound became psychological terror. The German MG-42 revved up to 1,200 revolutions per minute, sounding like a chainsaw. M2 fired at 450 to 600 revolutions per minute, methodical hammering, but each hammer blow meant possible dismemberment. Lieutenant Franz Hoffmann described, MG-42 made you lower your head. M2 made you question whether it was worth getting up again. Americans have discovered uses that Browning never imagined. Improvised sniper. Equipped with a telescopic sight, the M2 made precise shots at 2,000 meters. Carlos Hathcock, in Vietnam, would have made a confirmed kill at 2,286 meters. But the technique began in the Second World War. Demolition. Structures that would have withstood conventional explosives collapsed under concentrated M2 fire. Psychological suppression. The mere sound of an M2 being loaded was enough to make Germans retreat. Wehrmacht report. September 1944. Troops report damaged morale due to enemy heavy machine gun fire. Urgent need for development of adequate protection. Adequate protection did not exist. The Germans tried. Additional steel plates on vehicles. Too much weight. Little protection. Deeper trenches. M2S. Fired in an arc. Projectiles fell from above. Counterattack with MG-42. Insufficient range. The only effective defense, not being there. Ardennes, December 1944. Surprise German offensive. But Americans had M2. Many M2. In the infamous Malmedy massacre. A grim irony. The SS executed American prisoners. Survivors escaped and alerted nearby units. When SS advanced, they found a line of 20 M2S waiting. SS battalion destroyed in 15 minutes. 137 German deaths. 0 American casualties. Justice served at 890 meters per second. In February 1945, the seizure of documents revealed the true impact. Letter from Field Marshal Walter Model. The American heavy machine gun has become a decisive factor hindering our operations. Its ubiquitous presence and destructive power exceed our response capabilities. Troops have developed what can only be described as a phobia of this weapon. The final numbers were absurd. 400,000 square meters produced during the war. 8 billion. 50 BMG cartridges. It cost $1,500 to produce an M2 in 1945. The German MG-42 cost $150, but M2 lasted 10 times longer. It required 10 times less maintenance, and it caused 10 times more terror. Browning's mechanical hammer didn't just kill bodies, it destroyed the very will to fight. 6. The doctrine of power. M2 represented something beyond technical capability. It represented American philosophy of war. While Germans romanticized conflict, honor, glory, sacrifice, Americans treated it as an engineering problem. Germans built the MG-42, a masterpiece of engineering, with a cadence of 1,200 revolutions per minute. Complex, temperamental, needed an expert striker. Americans built the M2, reliable, durable, operable by any soldier with 3 days of training. General George Patton resume. Germans make the best weapons. We make the weapons that win wars. The difference was fundamental. The MG-42 was a Ferrari, impressive when it ran perfectly. The M2 was a John Deere tractor. It always worked, in any condition. In the African desert, M2 ran on sand. In the cold of Bastogne, M2 was operating at -30 degrees Celsius. In the humid hell of the Pacific, M2 was running on rust and mud. The MG-42 required constant cleaning, specific replacement parts, and quality ammunition. The M2 operated in a dirty, makeshift manner, with improvised parts, firing ammunition of questionable quality. But there was a deeper dimension. M2 democratized firepower. A Marine with an M1 Garand was a soldier. The same rifleman behind an M2 was equivalent to an entire platoon. This changed the dynamics of combat. The Germans relied on elite soldiers, few in number, but highly trained. Americans were turning farmers into killing machines with just 3 days of training. Oberst Hermann Bulck, considered one of the best German tactical commanders, observed, "Americans don't fight like soldiers. They fight like factory workers. But when every worker has a machine gun that destroys tanks, the distinction becomes irrelevant." M2 also changed the war economy. Germans, quality over quantity, a perfect Tiger II. Americans, quantity and quality. 1,000 square meters is good enough. Tiger II could destroy 10 Shermans, but I couldn't be in 10 places at the same time. M2 could. I was in every platoon, each train, each outpost. Philosophy extended beyond war. M2, designed in 1918, still in use in 2024, 106 years. No other automatic weapon came close. Why? Because Browning didn't design for a specific type of war, designed for fundamental physics. A 12.7 millimeters projectile, traveling at 890 meters per second, will always be devastating. It doesn't matter which decade it is. An Iraq veteran from 2003 reported, "We used the same M2 rifle that my grandfather used in World War II. It worked perfectly. Same weapon. 85 years difference. Still lethal, still feared, still hated by enemies." The Taliban in Afghanistan called M2 Shaitan, Satan, even fear, same respect, same helplessness. The Germans learned a lesson that all of America's enemies would learn. It's not about having the best weapon. It's about having the right weapon everywhere, all the time. And M2 was everywhere, always. 7. The final judgment. Poetic closure. Colonel Wilhelm von Reichmann survived the war, the same one who laughed at the American rookies in Kasserine, captured in May 1945. Questioned about German tactics, they asked about MG-42. He replied, "The MG-42 was the best machine gun. Faster, lighter, more terrifying sound. Break. But war isn't a competition of specifications. The American M2 was everywhere. When you heard it, you knew there was no escape. Not because it was better, because it was inevitable." They asked what lessons he had learned. Reichmann looked out the window of the prisoner of war camp. "I saw an M2 mounted on a guard tower. I learned that Americans don't win wars because they are better soldiers. They win because they turn war into a production problem. And they are very, very good at production." John Browning died in 1926. He never saw his creation dominate battlefields. "I never knew it would be used in every American war for a century." He never imagined that a design created to bring down wooden biplanes would destroy supersonic jets. But perhaps he knew something fundamental. Physics doesn't change. F equals, but always. Kinetic energy equals half mv squared always. A 45-gram projectile traveling at 890 meters per second will always destroy whatever it hits. Today, 2024. M2, still in production, still in use in 100 countries, still hated by enemies, still loved by allies. They changed the materials, better alloys. The sights have changed. Now they're digital. The mounting options have changed, remote control, but the mechanical heart remains the same. Even a massive bolt, even a short retreat, the same methodical hammer blows. Thump, thump, thump. German veteran, interviewed in 1995, the 50th anniversary of the end of the war. They ask which American weapon we feared most. Some say the atomic bomb, others say the B-17. I say the M2, because the atomic bomb was used twice. You could hear the B-17 coming. But the M2 was always there. On every corner, on every hill, in every damn American Jeep. They laughed when they saw inexperienced Americans in Kasserine. They stopped laughing when 12.7 millimeters projectiles pierced their fortifications. They laughed at the weapon, which was too heavy and too complex. They fell silent when it proved to be simple enough to produce millions. They laughed at the 1918 design during the 1943 war. They died realizing that the physics of 1918 was still killing people in 1943, and 1953, and 1963, and 1973, and it will continue killing as long as F equals mer. Browning's hammer spoke its universal language. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't the fastest sound. It wasn't the loudest sound. It was the sound that meant it didn't matter where you hid. Physics would find him, and physics always wins.